There was actually a little bit of controversy when this game was first announced because a lot of the assets were so close to the ones in Stardew Valley. So I played this one 30 minutes and I could not play. I really could not handle this game. There is a mini game where you get to harvest mangoes. So there is some farming in it. There is a tiny bit of farming, so I have an excuse to include it on the podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this 17th episode of the Game and Garden podcast, where we discuss everything related to farming games. I'm your host, Josh, and this week is my second solo episode. So we've had so many amazing guests so far, but 3 weeks ago, I had to do an episode all by myself, and it turned out it's actually the most well-performing episode of the podcast so far. So I decided that I would try to do 50-50. So half of the episodes will have a guest, half will be solo. And sometimes we may get 2 weeks in a row with a guest or 2 weeks in a row by myself. But I'm going to try to keep it pretty well balanced. So with that being said, we have a few interesting things to talk about today. So as always, we'll start with this week's releases. We have Dreamland Farm, Garden of the Sea, and yes, The Legend of Zelda, Echoes of Wisdom, which I know it's not a farming game, but we don't have too many farming games releasing right now, and it's a game that I know a lot of you are playing, enjoying, or want to know my thoughts on it, so I will be talking about Echoes of Wisdom. Then I will be reading some of your comments that you left on previous episodes, and at the end, we'll be covering some news. So we have Fae Farm coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Series X and S. We have Super Zoo Story, which just started its Kickstarter campaign. And we have a new trailer for Farmagia, a new farming sim. Well, a game with farming elements from Marvelous that's releasing on November 1st. So we'll go through all of these news later in the show. But first, let's talk about this week's releases, starting with Dreamland Farm. So this game released on September 27th for the Nintendo Switch. It is published by Red Deer Games, who also published Sprout Valley. And when I first saw this game, I thought, oh my gosh, it's just like Sprout Valley. Right now it's on sale, so it's about $2 or something like that. So it is very cheap, kind of like Sprout Valley. You can also get it quite cheap. And basically, it's this pixel art farming sim that is very simple. You play as this little character who moves to his grandma's farm to take over the farm. So pretty classic, pretty generic story. And you know what? At first, I was quite excited. I thought it's good to have a nice, very simple farming sim to play when you don't have too much time. Maybe you want to play something very simple for a few minutes and maybe something in between bigger farming sims. So I played this one 30 minutes and I could not play any longer. Honestly, that was the most I really could not handle this game. So it looks very cute, but the controls are just so clunky. To give you like an example of what it's like to play this game, when you open a menu, some of the menus to go back or like close the menu, some of them you'll have to go back with Y. Other menus, you'll have to go back with X. And other menus, you'll have to go back with B. And there's no like logical reason behind it. So the controls are just all over the place. So you'll open a menu and then you press V. Oh, it doesn't close the menu. And then another menu, you press V and that's the right button. So it's just there's no consistency, which is one thing that really annoys me in a game when there's no consistency, especially with the controls. There's also not too much you can do in this game. So there's farming. You can gather some resources. There are animals. None of it feels really nice. And when you farm or when you do anything, you have to play with both sticks. So you have the D-pad or the left stick to move, and then the right stick to aim. And like a lot of games do that. I guess like in Stardew Valley, you also use the right stick, right, to aim. But it's just very clunky in this game. Like, for example, if you're facing a fridge, even though you're right in front of the fridge, you will have to do the right stick up to make sure that you're selecting the fridge so that you can interact with it and put your food inside. The walking speed of your character is so slow. So the world is quite big, but just going from your farm to the town takes forever, or going even inside your farm from the little field to your barn where you can feed your animals. It just feels so tedious. And you move really like square by square Recently, I played a game called Bokujo Monogatari Life and Love, which was a Story of Seasons game on mobile from like 2007. And it's kind of the same type of controls where it's really like square by square. And I feel like for a game that's releasing in 2024, that's just not the way to do it. It just does not feel right. And when I got into town, I tried entering so many of the buildings, and a few of the buildings had their door closed, and I was able to enter into those. You have to make sure, once again, that you go up with the right stick. And other buildings had their door open, and I could not enter those. So it was a little bit weird. I don't know if it was a bug or not, but so many of the buildings I could not enter. And I don't know, I was receiving some quests too, but they were not really motivating or anything. Even though this game is $2, I guess if it's on sale, you can try it just out of curiosity, just because it is really cheap, but I cannot recommend this game full price. I would say if you want a really cheap farming sim, maybe go for Sprout Valley. I think you'll get your money's worth. There's a little bit more quality in Sprout Valley. But Dreamland Farm really does not do enough for me to really want to go back to it. I mean, I had to stop playing after 30 minutes. That being said, I am doing a giveaway for this game. It feels weird to say that, but the publisher Red Deer Games sent me a few Switch keys for this game. So I'll put the link down in the description if you want to participate in the giveaway. It's on Twitter, so I'm really grateful, really thankful for the publisher to send me those keys so I could share the game with you guys, but it's not something I would recommend buying. A game that I would recommend buying for some people is Garden of the Sea. So this one is releasing on October 3rd for Steam and Nintendo Switch. This is a game that was originally in VR. It released for VR a few years ago, and now they're doing a non-VR version. And the publisher sent me a key so I could play this one early. I played the Steam non-VR version, and for like 3 or 4 hours, and I had such a good time with this one. So basically, you're on this island, and it's in first person. You do some farming, fishing. You have these little creatures that you can befriend. You can decorate your island. You also have a little boat that you can drive to explore other islands where you'll uncover little treasures. And you have to find things on like several different islands to complete the main story. This game is very immersive because everything is in first person, and you can definitely feel that it was made for VR first. So like you really grab things with your hands. You really like do everything like you would in real life. For example, if you go to a shop, you have to grab your little purse, like your little wallet, and you have to drop the money in front of the cashier. And then you need to grab the item you want to purchase. So it's very interactive. It's very immersive and engaging. Maybe for some people, this could give them motion sickness, like the amount of movement that you have to go through to do all of the activities. But for me, I really liked it. It is a very cozy, very chill game. There's not too much challenge. I think it's probably fairly short. I'm guessing I can probably finish the story within 10 hours. And if I had the chance to play it in VR, I think I would probably enjoy it more, but I don't have the equipment for that. From what I've heard of people that have played the VR version, they really enjoyed it as well. So if you like what you see and what you hear, I would recommend it. But if you're not a fan of first-person games, or if you're looking for something very complex or challenging, this won't be it. But if you just want like a peaceful, very immersive adventure, then go check out Garden of the Sea. Next, the big game of this week, The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, released for the Nintendo Switch this September 26th. So this game, as I said, I know it's not a farming game, but there is a mini game where you get to harvest mangoes. So there is some farming in it. There is a tiny bit of farming, so I have an excuse to include it on the podcast. And I'm having a lot of fun with this game. I played it maybe a little bit less than 10 hours. It doesn't show how many hours I played on my Switch yet. It just says like played 6 days ago or something. So I think I have to wait like 1 week for that to go away, and then I can actually see my time. But I think I'm about 10 hours in, and I'm having a blast. You play as Zelda first in this game, for those who don't know. And your goal is to save Link. So first of all, I love that they're reversing the roles for once. And the big difference is that Zelda doesn't really have a sword. She can't really fight like Link. So instead, she's doing these echoes. So you can copy things like a table or a bed, and you can then put these in the world to do some platforming and climb over things. You can also use like blocks of water, plants, trampolines, and also monsters. So combats almost feel like Pokemon, where you see a monster and then you defeat the monster. And once the monster is defeated, like for the first time, you can learn the echo of that monster, and then you can summon that monster and they will fight for you. So it's a lot of that, and you just like watch the monster fight the other monsters. You can also move objects with your wand. You can follow monsters or things that are moving with your wand. There's definitely an emphasis on the puzzle aspect in this game rather than the combat, which I find interesting. And a lot of the puzzles have different ways of solving them, kind of like in Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom. And I almost feel like this game is Breath of the Wild, but in top-down 2D. So it's kind of like if you mixed Link's Awakening with Breath of the Wild. And yeah, I'm loving it so far. And one thing I will say, I avoided a lot of the trailers. I avoided as many spoilers as I could for this game before it came out. And I was so shocked at how big the world was. I was expecting the world to be kind of like the same size as Link's Awakening, but it's so big. There is a lot to see. And you have fast travel points, so it's very simple to like go back to previous places. And I feel like I've been spending so much of my time just exploring the world, trying to uncover as many secrets as possible, exploring caves, doing side quests. There are so many side quests in this game, so I think I said that already, but I've been doing a lot of those. They're really fun. And yeah, in the main story, you have these rifts, which are kind of like a broken, weird dimension. You go into these rifts, and they're a bit like regular dungeons, but shorter. I still feel like this game doesn't, at least so far, I'm still not getting that proper dungeon feeling from classic Zelda games. It still feels a bit more like shrines, but I am having a great time overall. I only have a few complaints with this game. The first one is I feel like it might be a little bit too easy, or maybe the difficulty will go up as I progress through the game. But so far, I found that each puzzle was kind of easy to solve. As I said, a lot of them can be solved in multiple ways, and a lot of them can be solved. Sorry, I've said that word like 3 times in a row, but a lot of them can be solved just by like placing platforms on top of each other, or like reusing like boulders to block something. A lot of them are really kind of easy to do. And I found that a lot of the echoes I just did not have to use. And that brings me to my other point, is that there are so many echoes, so many items. All of the monsters can be turned into echoes. And so you have this list of echoes that you have to scroll through every time you want to make a different one. And then you press Y to create that echo. But it doesn't take long for you to have dozens. And I'm sure eventually you'll have like 100 echoes. And I wish you could either have different like preset echoes, like a hotbar with like maybe 4 echoes that you could summon very quickly. Maybe eventually there will be a new tool or something to do that. But right now you can only do one at a time, and then you want to do a different one, you gotta open the menu. There's like a quick menu, but it still takes some time to find the echo, and it's just a lot. So I wish there was either, a way to have presets or just less echoes overall, because I feel like a lot of them are not necessary. So those would be my main complaints so far. Maybe a little bit too easy, and maybe too many echoes, with a lot of them being useless. But the game is very charming. I'm enjoying the side quests, and I've been playing this game more than Tears of the Kingdom. I think I might play it more than Breath of the Wild. I don't know if this is kind of like a controversial take, but I actually enjoyed Link's Awakening more than the recent 3D Zelda games. I started playing this series with the older games, and I like that this one, even though it has elements from Breath of the Wild, it feels a bit more like those classic games. So I like that, and I'll definitely be playing more of it. Also, I forgot to mention, but for the combat, yes, at first you only can summon echoes to fight for you, but eventually you do unlock the ability to use Link's sword, but there is a time limit which increases over time. but you can do it for maybe 10 to 30 seconds, and then you revert back to Zelda with her wand. So you can use a sword sometime. I wish you could use it a little bit more. But of course, that's like the gimmick of the game, right? Is that you don't have a sword and you have to use the echoes. So I think you just have to go into this game expecting that it will be a different experience. But I can't wait to play more of it. And hopefully, some of the issues I have with it right now will be solved just by playing more. So these are the new releases for this week. Dreamland Farm, sorry, cannot recommend. Garden of the Sea, I can recommend it to some people. Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, it is really good. Even though I do have some complaints with it, it is actually a really good game. So I think if you like Zelda games, if you want a high quality top-down puzzle adventure game, I think you will enjoy it. And now it's time for my favorite segment of these solo episodes, which ironically is when I'm not all by myself. I'm going to be responding to some of your comments you left on previous episodes. Starting with Becca Penguin, who left a comment on the episode with Isha, where we talked about all of our favorite Harvest Moon games. That was such a fun episode. And Becca says, enjoyed listening to this while working. My first Harvest Moon game was A Wonderful Life. As you guys pointed out, it has a lot of issues and could have been much better, but as a kid, I loved it so much. There is always something about your first Harvest Moon game. Went back in later years and tried the SNES and 64 ones and couldn't get into them as much. I'm jealous of all the magic it holds for you guys. She brings up something really interesting here because if you watched any of my content, you know that I started with Harvest Moon 64, and even today, I'm completely obsessed with that game. I go back to it almost every year, and even though it is not perfect, I can absolutely recognize the flaws that Harvest Moon 64 has. It's clunky, it doesn't have like quality of life features that you would expect in recent farming games. But thanks to the nostalgia that I have attached to that game, and also because I started gaming around that era, like the 64, and I played some SNES as well. And I used to game so much, like all the time as a kid. So I think I really got accustomed to the graphics of that era and the gameplay mechanics of that era. So for me, playing an older game, even if it's a game I have never played before, I can easily put myself back in that time period and enjoy it as if it was a brand new game without constantly feeling like it is outdated. Whereas if someone started gaming, maybe like Becca with A Wonderful Life, maybe she was playing games before, but A Wonderful Life was her first farming sim, or a lot of people started playing farming sims with Stardew Valley. Recently, we've also been seeing a lot of people getting into gaming with Animal Crossing New Horizons. So for these gamers who started with more modern games, I can't imagine how hard it must be to go to a game that's 20 or 30 years old and doesn't have all of the things that you're used to, which is totally fair. But then these people are missing out on so many games, which is why I think it's amazing when developers do remakes, adding lots of quality of life features. For example, Marvelous did Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town, Story of Seasons, A Wonderful Life. So I think it makes these games more digestible and accessible for newer gamers. And hopefully we see more remakes in the future. But yeah, all of that to say that I'm very grateful that I was born in the 90s and I got to see really those consoles evolve, get to play these earlier games. And even today, it's really easy for me to go back. But I am curious if you are in the same generation as me and you started playing games around the same time period. I'd love to know if you find it easy or not to go back to older games, even if they're not necessarily games that you've played in the past. Next, we have Diana Chamomile, love that name, makes me want to drink some tea, who says, like a conspiracy theorist, I've been saying Fantasy Life was being delayed for the next console. It's never too late to pick it up. I'm playing it for the first time this year on a modded 2DS. It's super cute and fun. You know, there are so many things like this in life where it really sounds crazy at first until it doesn't. And I do feel like that's what happened with Fantasy Life. And same as Tales of the Shire. So both games were planned for end of 2024. And I'm thinking maybe the next Nintendo console was supposed to come out at the end of 2024. And then all of these games, well, two of these games, there's probably other games that I'm just not following that are being delayed as well. They're being delayed to spring 2025. So I do think there's probably something with that. I'm sure a lot of these games will release for both console at the same time. And I'm sure there's probably a combination of factors in there. So maybe they wanted to polish the game a little bit more, finish a few things, fix some extra bugs, and then maybe the platform releasing it on both platforms at the same time is kind of like another factor that went into their decision of delaying the game. One comment I saw from quite a few people actually is that they were delaying the game to add open world, to make it an open world. From the trailer, that's not the impression I got. So in the last Fantasy Life trailer, they announced that it was going to be an open world. So that was a new information, but I don't think, maybe the wording was confusing, or maybe there is like another press release or something that I missed. I don't think they're delaying it to make it an open world. I'm sure if it had released in October, it would have been open world as well. So I don't think they're making any drastic changes. But if I missed something, let me know, because I've seen quite a few people mention that it was delayed in order to make it an open world, which I don't think is the case. And Diana also said that it's never too late to pick up the first game, and that is so true. I have it on my 3DS, and I've been playing a little bit of it. I want to finish it before the new one comes out. I'm working on it slowly. I want to make a video on it as well. But it is certainly worth it. If anyone listening has a 3DS and they have not played Fantasy Life yet, go get it, play it, and I guarantee it will keep you busy until the new one comes out. Our next comment is from Neolithium Production, who says, my only worry for Tales of the Shire. So this was on last week's episode about Tales of the Shire, which I do recommend you check out. I got to play the game for 90 minutes, and I discussed with Let's Play K, who also played it, and it was so much fun to chat about the game. It was such an amazing episode. But yeah, that person said, my only worry for Tales of the Shire is that the gameplay loop of cooking to improve relationships will get quickly old. I'm hoping for a lot of other things to do outside of just cooking to up friendship. From what I've played so far, I'm pretty sure, and from what they've announced, I feel like if there's a big feature in the game, it will be announced in trailers and things like that. But I'm pretty sure that the only way to increase your friendships will be through cooking. Maybe you'll do some quests, but I think the core gameplay loop is really just gathering ingredients, cooking, hosting a meal, gathering ingredients, cooking, hosting a meal, gathering ingredients, cooking, hosting a meal. I think that is pretty much it. So I do share your worry. From what I've played in the 90 minutes, it was very fun to gather ingredients, cook, and host a meal. But I do wonder if it will become complex or interesting enough to make it worth doing over and over again. I know there will be more cooking stations, so the cooking mechanics will get a bit more involved. And there are things like, for example, you can set the table, right? So you can decorate, you can place the plates however you want, put little candles, but put little things on the table. But it doesn't seem like any of those things have an actual impact on the gameplay or on the points, the friendship points you're going to get. So, like I said in the episode last week, I feel like after some hours of gameplay, I won't bother setting the table. I'm just gonna put the dishes there and let the characters eat, and I'm just gonna try to go through things as quickly as possible. But based on my experience and based on everything they've shown in the trailers, I wouldn't expect really too much more. So I do share a concern, but I would not expect, honestly, much more than that. And in a similar vein, the next comment is from Nikki, who said, Tales of the Shire has been giving me flashbacks to all the hype and marketing around Fae Farm, and it makes me worried that the game will ultimately feel a bit empty and disappointing. As a big Lord of the Rings fan, I really hope I'm wrong. I think that Fae Farm is definitely a good comparison for this game. You can tell they're really going all in with the marketing. There is a big budget to build hype around this game. And from what I've played, like I said, I really enjoyed the first 90 minutes. And same as Fae Farm. Fae Farm, I really enjoyed the first playthrough, actually, the first like 20, 30, 40 hours. I had fun going through it, but it's also not the game that I would go back to. And overall, it felt a bit shallow. For example, in Fae Farm, you had 4 seasons, right? Like in most farming games. And in each season, you had different crops, different forageables. But in the end, they were all pretty much the same. Like every season, you would have like a different berry or a different root vegetable, and they were all used in the same manner. So it didn't make too much of a difference. Also, the festivals were very lacking. They were mostly just like little shops. The gameplay loop was very repetitive, and I feel like Tales of the Shire could be something similar where I'm going to play it for one playthrough. I'm going to be enjoying that playthrough, but I don't know if it's going to be a game where I want to go back to it again and again, or if it's going to be a game that I want to put hundreds of hours into. I will say that the world is definitely more interesting than in Fae Farm. The characters have more interesting dialogue. There's a little bit more of a story. Of course, you have the whole like Lord of the Rings universe, lore, characters. So that makes it more interesting, but overall, I feel like it will be kind of similar to Fae Farm, where you have a good game that looks fine, has good controls, overall, like a good polish, a good feel to it, because I think Fae Farm like felt amazing, looked great, but overall, it was just a bit shallow, which made it not something that I regret playing, but also not something I would play again. And that brings me to our news segment. The first bit of news for today, we have Fae Farm coming to PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S. This is so tedious to say all of these Xboxes and stuff. On October 22nd. This game released last year in September for Switch and Steam. So now it will become available to pretty much all platforms. So for those who have never had the chance to play it, now they will be able to. And on all of these platforms, there will be a standard edition and a deluxe edition that will come with the DLC. When I first played this game, I had the deluxe edition, but the DLC was not out yet. And I did go back to the game after the DLC released. So if you don't know, the first DLC unlocks a new area and you learn a new skill where you can like tame these little creatures, these little critters, and they give you some buffs, which I think would have been very useful if I had access to those from the beginning of the game. It would have made some of the areas and just progressing in the game a little bit more fun. And then the second DLC adds a whole new like town area with a new cave temple thing with platforming and some puzzles. I think there's definitely more substance to the second DLC. I did go back to it also a little bit. But because I was pretty much done with the rest of the game, I think I was not really in the mood to like really get back into it to do that extra world. But I think that if you have the money for the deluxe edition, it could be worth it. And I think the DLC will enhance your experience a bit. That being said, like I mentioned before the news segment, so I'm gonna make it quick here. I had a good time with Fae Farm for the first playthrough. It feels good, it looks good, but it feels a bit shallow. There's not too much innovation with the gameplay mechanics. It doesn't do much that other farming sims don't do. The social aspect of the game, like the character interactions or the festivals, are simply not that great. If you're looking for a mindless farming sim to play through once, I think it's good, but it's not going to be the kind of game that I would go back to over and over again. I don't think I'm ever going to do a second playthrough. So it's a fine game. I would describe it as fine. Now we're going to be having a look at the Kickstarter campaign for Super Zoo Story. And I have to say, I was a bit shocked when they announced that they were doing a Kickstarter campaign for this game because it's been in development for over 3 years. And I honestly thought we were about to see this game releasing any moment now. I thought I was going to play this one this year. But actually, no, it won't release until the second half of 2026. Usually we see Kickstarter campaigns pretty early in development, and this one is coming in like the second half of the development. So maybe it's something they had to do to like assure that the game was going to get done. But yeah, we're going to have a quick look at it. So they have now raised 36,000 US dollars out of 60,000. And this game is being made by a pretty small team of like 3 people. There's Ihor and his wife Anna and their friend Alexi. So there are 3 people working on this game. So it is pretty small. And also I know that they are being published by Crytivo. And one thing I've noticed is that a lot of indie games that go with Crytivo for publishing end up doing a Kickstarter. So maybe it's something that they're trying to push or try to like incentivize their developers to do. If you've never heard of this game, I would describe it as Stardew Valley meets Zoo Tycoon. And there was actually a little bit of controversy when this game was first announced because a lot of the assets were so close to the ones in Stardew Valley. And they did change some things a little bit. So actually Concerned Ape, the developer of Stardew Valley, reacted and did say that he would love if the developers would like find their own style a little bit more. And they did, I think, apologize at one point, and they kind of worked on things. So it still definitely has that Stardew Valley feel to it. Even like the animations, the running animations, the trees look very similar. And some people will say, well, it's pixel art. It's a game with farming. Of course, they're going to look similar. But I will say that they look very similar. I think there's like thousands of ways to do pixel art and have it look unique. There's definitely a lot of similarities here. But the good thing is, though, is that the gameplay is very unique. So there will be farming, fishing, romance, taking care of animals, everything you would expect in your typical farm sim, life sim. But the animals part, so you're not going to be just doing ranching, but you will be managing a whole zoo in this game. So that's where the Zoo Tycoon part comes in. So you'll have tons of different animals, 70 different species that you will be able to crossbreed. Every animal will have different needs, so like a different diet, or they will have different wants for their enclosure. Some animals won't do well if they're with another animal. For example, if you put a gazelle and a lion together, it probably won't end up well, but others will do good together. So you'll have to take that into account, which reminds me a bit of Paleo Pines. I think even though Paleo Pines had lots of flaws, it did a real good job at making each dinosaur feel unique. And there were so many little things that you had to take into account while taking care of them. So it seems like, yeah, similarly here, there's going to be a big emphasis on making sure that the habitat is right and that all of your animals are happy. And I'm just loving that we are seeing other games in this like farm sim genre, but taking a completely different approach. And like there are lots of games where you manage a zoo, like you've got like Zoo Tycoon, Planet Zoo, but these are management games. Whereas this one, it's really like a life sim, but you manage a zoo. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like this is so unique. Another unique feature of this game is that instead of mining, you will be doing some archaeology, and you'll find some fossils of dinosaurs. And eventually, you'll be able to bring these dinosaurs back to life. So hopefully, it doesn't end up like in Jurassic Park. But yes, yeah, so you'll have dinosaurs in your zoo as well as regular, normal animals. There's also going to be underwater exploration, kind of like in Coral Island, where you'll find some fish and you'll be able to breed those fish as well. There is really a lot on their Kickstarter campaign. So if you want to see all of the features, you want to see how much you need to back this game, have access to the different builds, all of the rewards, I'll put a link, so feel free to check it out by yourself. But quickly, I'm going to be sharing the timeline with you. So right now, they are doing the Kickstarter campaign. In the second half of 2025, they'll be doing the alpha. So if you give a certain amount of money to the campaign, you'll have access to that. And in the first half of 2026, the beta, and second half of 2026, the full release. There are some stretch goals right now. So if they get, for example, 210,000 US dollars, they will be adding console support. 250, they will be adding family and kids system. So I don't know how far they're going to get in these stretch goals. So personally, I will be playing this game when it releases. I think, even though I'm not a big fan of how close the art style is to Stardew Valley, I think the gameplay sounds very unique. So I'm going to be giving it a chance. And I'm glad to see that they already got over 50% of their funding in like 1 day. So I have absolutely no doubt that in the next 28 days, they'll be able to complete their campaign. And last piece of news for today, Marvelous released a character trailer for Farmagia, where we can get to see a little bit more of the gameplay and the different characters that we're going to be playing as in this game. If you're not familiar with what Farmagia is, it is the newest IP from Marvelous. So they're doing Story of Seasons, Rune Factory, and on November 1st, we're going to be getting Farmagia. The game will be split into 3 phases. So in the first phase, you will be farming monsters. So you're going to be planting like monster seeds. You'll water them and then you'll actually harvest monsters. And in the second phase, you're going to be giving items to these monsters to train them and make them stronger. And then in the third phase, which is what we see the most of in this trailer, you'll go in dungeons with these monsters and like you have armies of monsters and you'll just send them attacking these bosses and fight. And then you'll repeat the cycle, go back to farming, raise more monsters, train them, go back into more dungeons. And yeah, I'm really happy with this trailer because we get to see a little bit more of the gameplay. We don't see much of the farming. Like I said, it's mostly on the combat. And it seems like you'll have 4 buttons. So Y, X, A, and B, obviously. And each button will be associated with a type of monster. So I'm guessing you'll have to take into account like elemental attributes and things like that to send the correct monster to deal as much damage as possible. It almost reminds me of Pikmin in a way, just because you're controlling so many monsters at once. Maybe a mix of like Pikmin and Dynasty Warriors, because it looks very chaotic. There is a lot happening on the screen. And yeah, I'm very excited for this game. I don't think this is going to be like the game of the year or anything like that, but it could be a really fun time if it is executed well. So I hope there's going to be a good amount of difficulty, a good amount of strategy into like, maybe you'll have to make sure you use the right monsters against the right enemies. And it seems like you'll be able to switch between the character that you're playing as. So you'll have this party of people and it seems like you'll be able to switch. So maybe each one will have different skills. So hopefully that is something you'll have to take into account. It's definitely not like any other farming game. And I don't know if we can really use the words farming game for this one, even though there will be a little bit of farming and it is part of the game. But the combat seems interesting and I can't wait to see more. I can't wait to learn more about this game. It is releasing on November 1st for PlayStation 5, Nintendo Switch, and Steam. And you can pre-order the game now for PS5 and Switch if you want a physical edition. And they have like a premium edition that comes with an art book, the soundtrack, and the game. So I will make sure to get my Day 1 edition, I think they call it. The only thing that kind of annoys me a little bit with this game, at least based on this trailer, it seems like all the cutscenes will be kind of like visual novel style, where you just have the character portraits talking, which is very similar to, for example, El Rentero's Wanderings, which was a dungeon crawler that released not too long ago. That was a lot of fun, but I have a really hard time. Even when the story is interesting, I have a hard time when all of the dialogues are in this visual novel style. I need it to be a little bit more stimulating, a little bit more engaging, and that format just makes me want to skip through all of the text. So hopefully they manage to not make the dialogue like go for too long. Hopefully they manage to keep it like engaging. Maybe we'll have some actual proper cutscenes from time to time. I think that would be lovely. But yeah, this has the potential to be something fun, maybe on par with like games like El Rentero's Wanderings, Silent Hope. Even though the gameplay is different from these games, the loop is similar, where there's like a phase where you farm or craft, do things like that, and then there's the dungeon phase. So I feel like it will have a similar feel. And even though these two games, like El Rentero's Wanderings and Silent Hope, were flawed, I really enjoyed them for what they were. So I'm going to put my expectations on the same level as these two games, and I think I won't be too disappointed. But yeah, so this releases on November 1st. And that is it for this week's episode of the Gaming Garden podcast. As always, thank you so much, everyone, for your support. If you're watching on YouTube, feel free to leave a like and subscribe. You can also leave some comments to let me know your thoughts about any topic I covered in this episode, so that during the next solo episode, I can maybe respond to your comment. You can also leave a super thanks if you want to support the podcast even more. And if you're listening on audio platforms, so Audible, Spotify, all of the others, then feel free to leave a review. And yeah, so that's pretty much it for this week's episode. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and listening. And I'll see you all next week. Bye.